footprint, he said. The biggest risk with regard to the Chinese Communist Party is appeasement. President Trump, he added, has said, enough. We're not going to let that happen anymore. War begins. U.S. deploys strength military after China invade Taiwan in South China Sea. The United States is pushing back against stepped-up Chinese military activities near Taiwan and in the South China Sea as a means of deterring a conflict with Beijing, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says. China in recent days has conducted large-scale military exercises and provocative jet flights near Taiwan in what China's state media say is a response to a visit to the island by a senior State Department official last week. China's military fired 4 missiles into the South China Sea last week, and the People's Liberation Army this week posted a video online showing a simulated Chinese bombing strike on the American territory of Guam. Asked about the growing tensions in an interview with the Washington Times, Mr. Pompeo blamed past policies that he said ignored threatening Chinese activities. He hinted that Washington was also ready to expand the offensive against Chinese internet companies operating in the U.S. and will seek to completely shut down a network of Chinese cultural centers in the U.S. called Confucius Institutes as soon as the end of this year. What we have done for decades is we have permitted the Chinese Communist Party to engage in threatening or disruptive behavior, whether that is predatory economic practices and the like, and they have continued to expand their capacity and their footprint, he said. The biggest risk with regard to the Chinese Communist Party is appeasement. President Trump, he added, has said, enough. We're not going to let that happen anymore. The Secretary of State said in the interview that leaders in Beijing need to recognize the Trump administration's seriousness and Mr. Trump's commitment in pushing back against Chinese expansionism. We watch these military activities, and we prepare, Mr. Pompeo said. President Trump's been clear we don't want conflict with China. They say they don't want conflict with us as well. We hope they'll reduce what they're doing to create this tension. The increase in saber-rattling and threatening rhetoric from China has worried some U.S. officials, who see the activities as possible signs that Beijing is preparing for some type of military action. China's most xenophobic state-controlled outlet warned in an editorial this week that the series of military exercises near Taiwan could be a prelude to an attack on the island. China has been warned it does not have the power to claim the disputed South China Sea as theirs, according to an expert. China claims it has historic right of ownership to almost the entire South China Sea, despite a 2016 international arbitration ruling saying Beijing's claim had no legal basis under international law. But the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan and Brunei also have overlapping claims to parts of it. DWF's head of transport, Jonathan Moss, has explained China
started. The United States trying to start a war with China.
China does not have the right to claim islands in the waters as its own. When asked whether China does have a right over the disputed waters, not according to the judgment by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. They derived the judgment from the provisions of UNCLOS, which is the statute which was brought into force in December 1982. Certainly, if you look at the judgment, which is over 100 pages long, it suggests that China doesn't have the right to do that. Mr. Moss also noted there is a real risk of further conflict in the waters. There have been pockets of conflict before. Going back about 20 years, there was a naval battle where 3 Chinese vessels were engaged with the Philippines Navy gunboats. That was in the Spratly Islands. There's definitely the risk of isolated incidents, and as we know, a string of isolated incidents can lead to major conflict. It comes as 2 U.S. Air Force B-1B bombers took off from Guam and headed west over the Pacific Ocean to the hotly contested South China Sea. The sleek jets made a low-level pass over the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan and its escorting fleet, which was exercising nearby in the Philippine Sea, according to images released by the U.S. military. The operation was part of the Trump administration's intensifying challenge to China's ruling Communist Party and its sweeping territorial claims over one of the world's most important strategic waterways. While senior Trump officials launch diplomatic and rhetorical broadsides at Beijing, the U.S. Defense Department is turning to the firepower of its heavily armed, long-range bombers as it seeks to counter Beijing's bid to control the seas off the Chinese coast. Since late January, American B-1B and B-52 bombers, usually operating in pairs, have flown about 20 missions over key waterways, including the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and the Sea of Japan, according to accounts of these flights from U.S. Air Force statements and official social media posts. These missions, military analysts say, are designed to send a crystal-clear signal the United States can threaten China's fleet and Chinese land targets at any time, from distant bases, without having to move America's aircraft carriers and other expensive surface warships within range of Beijing's massive arsenal of missiles. In this response to the growing power of China's military, the Pentagon has combined some of its oldest weapons with some of its newest, Cold War-era bombers and cutting-edge, stealthy missiles. During its real combat-oriented exercises and combat readiness patrols in the Taiwan Straits since last week, the Chinese People's Liberation Army (PLA) has conducted intensive missions of the island of Taiwan from both its west and east, with
your own home. It's more than just a house. It's a kitchen that's been passed down, along with the recipes. 3 generations.
West and east, with the number of operations surpassing that of fighter jets and bombers. The operations, aimed at gathering intelligence on the forces of Taiwan, the US and Japan, including their submarine activities, troop deployments and military facility situations, will prepare the PLA for a possible future battle, Chinese mainland experts said on Sunday. Since Taiwan's Defense Authority has started publishing PLA aircraft activities near the island with detailed information, photos and flight paths, and as of press time on Sunday, it has announced 10 sorties by Y-8 anti-submarine warfare aircraft on 6 different days. All flew above the waters to the southwest of the island.